All right, guys, getting into chapter 2 now. Chapter 2 deals with linear equations. And in this first section, we're going to talk about writing equations. So previously, we evaluated and simplified algebraic expressions. And now we're going to translate sentences into equations and translate equations into sentences. So just a little bit of vocabulary here, the word formula. Everything else we go over, you're going to be familiar or have at least already been exposed to the terminology here. So this video, we're going to focus on writing verbal expressions. And then we're going to, in the second video, talk about how to write an equation into a sentence. So to write an equation, identify the unknown for which you are looking for and assign a variable for it. Then write the sentence as an equation. Look for keywords such as is as much, is the same as, or is identical to. Those phrases are phrases that indicate you're going to have an equal sign, which makes it an equation and not simply an expression. You see the difference between an expression and an equation. An expression does not contain an equal sign, an equation does. Okay? All right, so the Daytona 500 is widely considered to be the most important event of the NASCAR circuit. The distance around the track is 2.5 miles, and the race is a total of 500 miles. We can write an equation to determine how many laps it would take to finish the race. So consider the Daytona 500 example. So in words, the length of each lap times the number of laps is equal to or is the length of the race. So if you let L represent the number of laps, then you would have 2.5 times L equals 500. Because for each lap you go 2.5 miles, if the total is 500 miles, you want to figure out how many laps that would make. So you got to multiply. All right, so the equation would just be 2.5 L equals 500. So here's a couple for us to try now. 7 times a number squared is 5 times the difference of K and M. All right. So 7 times a number squared. I don't know what the number is, so I assign a variable to it, call it N, is 5 times the difference of K and M. All right, so 7 times N squared, so 7 multiplied N squared, is, so you got to have an equal sign, 5 times the difference of K and M. Now, why are those parentheses there? Because it's not 5 times K minus M, it's 5 times the difference. So what you want to do is think it's got to be 5 times the answer to the subtraction problem, because that's what the difference indicates, is the answer to a subtraction problem. What's the subtraction problem? K and M. So you got to do 5 times parentheses K minus M. So if you just write it out, it's 7N squared equals 5 parentheses K minus M. Okay? Here's another one. 15 times a number subtracted from 80 is 25. Now this is one of those tricky ones where if you just write it in the order that the words appear, you're not going to be correct there. So it's 15 times a number subtracted from 80. So you would have 80 minus 15 times a number is 25. Okay, so 80 minus 15 times N equals 25. And that is our answer. All right, guys, here's a couple for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video and hit play when you're ready to go. All right, here we go. 2 plus the quotient of a number and 8 is the same as 16. So is the same as implies equal. So it's got to be equal to what? Equal to 16. So it's 2 plus quotient means to divide, or you can have a fraction. The quotient of a number, I don't know what the number is, so I'm going to call it N and 8. So the quotient is N and 8, so N divided by 8. So 2 plus N divided by 8 equals 16. There we go, so that's part A. Part B, 27 times k is h squared decreased by 9. So is means equal. So what is it? 27 times k, well, 27k is equals h squared decreased by 9. Well, h squared decreased by 9, you have to subtract 9 from it. All right, so 27k equals h squared minus 9 is the equation you want for that one. Okie dokie. All right, so translating sentences into algebraic expressions and equations is a valuable skill in solving real-world problems, because in the problem, they're not always just going to say what the equation is. You have to read the problem and figure out what operations you can do to set up the equation, and so forth and so on. So refer to the information on the left. I forgot to put it on there, but I'll read it to you as we need it. In how many days will 261,000 flights have occurred in the United States? Now, this is on page 76 in your online textbook. So there's a little picture with a plane next to it. And here's what it says. In 1919, Britain and France offered a flight that carried 2 passengers at a time. Now there are more than 87,000 flights each day in the US. So, and the information given in the problem is that there are approximately 87,000 flights per day in the United States. We are asked to find how many days it will take for 261,000 flights to have occurred. So write an equation. Let D represent the number of days needed, because that's what the variable is. How many days, not how many flights, how many days. Even though we're talking about flights, we want to know how many days it would take. So 87,000 times the number of days is or equals 261,000. So 87,000 D equals 20 or 261. And so you can find D by asking what number times 87,000 is 261,000. Well, you could just divide these two and you would get 3. Since D represents days, the answer is 3 days. Now you can check that by doing substituting 3 in for D in your equation and see if it works. So 87,000 times 3 would equal 261,000. So the answer makes sense and works for the original problem. Now remember, when you're reporting your final answer for the problem, you want to say 3 days. You want to put the units, that's plural, you want to put the units on your answer, okay? Since the number means something in the context of the problem. Okie dokie. All right, so here's one for you to try. Go ahead and read it, pause the video, and hit play when you're ready. Okay, we're back. There are 50 members in the North Carolina Senate. This is 70 fewer than the number in the North Carolina House of Representatives. How many members are in the North Carolina House of Representatives? So you have 50 members in the North Carolina. And it says this is 70 fewer than the number in the North Carolina House of Representatives. How many are in the House of Representatives? So this is, so equals 70 fewer than the number in the House. So I'm going to use or House of Representatives, so I'm going to use R. So 50 is equal to 70 less than the number of representatives. So 50 is equal to R minus 70. It wouldn't be 70 minus R because it's 70 less than what the number of representatives is. Okay, so that is our equation that represents this situation. And what would R have to be? Right, it would have to be 120 representatives. Okay, and sorry, my stylus doesn't work too well to write on there. Okay, all right, moving on. A rule for the relationship between certain quantities is called a formula, and these equations use variables to represent numbers and form general rules. So let's translate this sentence into a formula. The area of a triangle equals the product of half the length of the base and height. So let A equal the area. So A equals the product of half the length of the base and the height. So we're going to use B and H for base and height. So area equals the multiplication problem of 1/2 B and H. So area equals 1/2 base times height. And you probably already know that formula, but this, if you didn't know it and you heard it in words as a sentence, this is how you would translate it. Okay? So here's one for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video and hit play when you're ready. All right. So in a right triangle, the square of the measure of the hypotenuse C is equal to the sum of the squares of the measures of the legs A and B. All right. So here's what they're talking about. Here's a right triangle. Here's C, A, and B. So the square of the measure of the hypotenuse C, basically just a fancy way of saying C squared, is equal to, equals, the sum, so we got to add what? The squares of the legs, measures of the legs A and B. So it's A squared plus B squared. That's the sum of the squares. Now, it's not the same as if you wrote A plus B squared. That's the square of the sum of the legs, okay? That's not the same thing. We want the sum of the squares of the legs. So in other words, you want to square each of them first and add them together, not add them together and then square the answer. You will not get the same answer if you had actual numbers in there. Okie dokie? All right. Okay, so that's it for this video. Stay tuned, and in the next one, we're going to talk about how to write sentences from equations. All right, guys, see you there.